Okay, so if you are new here, my name is Rebecca. I am an ACT and SAT instructor. I have been asked a lot to kind of help with the science section, and it's not as common now with the new enhanced ACT with the science being optional, but there are still a lot of students who are taking the science test. So this video is created for them who have asked me to provide just some support with this. So kind of the high level is going to be like simple and practical ways to improve your science score. And one of the best things you can do for this is after this video is to do at least some of a science practice test. There's tons of free ones online. And yeah, so let's go ahead and check it out. And just a side note, I will be using the April 2026 ACT science materials to kind of go over a couple questions at the end. But kind of before we get started, is with the ACT science section. So the first question that I kind of want to answer before we kind of like get deep into a little bit of like what would actually improve a score or like best practices is should you take it? And that really boils down to you and your particular college admissions. So in the state of Florida, where I am, most of the public schools, like public colleges in Florida, are actually ignoring the science score and it's not required for Bright Futures. So if you're in Florida, kind of factor that in. But there's private schools that are looking for it. Some schools will take the science score and factor it in, which can work out well if you are already like a higher science score. That's great. But it really just boils down to the college you want to go to. And I know that's like a not the clearest answer, but it's true. And every like school is kind of taking it differently. So I would just say, check with admissions and what's going to make you the most competitive. So the science section, I want to dispel a belief that it's really science based. It technically is, and I have a degree in science education, but the thing is, it's really just like a reading comprehension test with some science flair. So I'll give you an example of a passage in a minute if you've never seen the ACT science, and we'll do some practical tips. But that's the first thing you need to know is that it is a speed reading comprehension test. And with the science section, with the new enhanced ACT, you're going to have 40 questions in 40 minutes. Okay, so that's kind of simple. It's like 1 minute per question. It doesn't always work out that way. But the thing is, there's tons of passages. I think it's either 6 to 7. It does kind of change. And then one of the passages will not be graded because it is considered a field question. They're going to have a bunch of different types of science questions, and it really is going to vary kind of what you see there. But that's kind of like the high level. And so let's actually talk about like how we can best take it. And there's just some best practices here. So let's go ahead and let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing for like the science section to best improve your score, and this is really dumb, but it's just to not read. And what I mean by that is as you scroll down, and I'm going to show you just kind of a screenshot real quick. So this is one of the science passages. And what I'm highlighting is when I would take this on test day, instead of like reading this and then going to the questions, I would personally go straight to the questions and then back look, and we'll model that in a minute. Very, very simple. And it's just because like you just don't have enough time. If you have time and a half, it might help you to read. But at the same time, a lot of students who read the science don't remember what they read, or it's a lot of charts. So it just doesn't always make sense to read it all. Number 2 is to use the numbers, and we'll model that in a little bit, but there is a bunch of numbers and hints built in to the ACT science, and you kind of use those as what I would say is your landmarks, and it kind of directs you in the best direction of like how to actually find the answer, and it gives you tons and tons of tips. And then number 3 with the science section, and this is controversial, there is always one stupid hard question per passage. Not always, but almost always. And on that one there, I suggest for students who are consistently running out of time to skip that question, ideally flag it and come back. If you have to fill in an answer, go ahead and bubble in something. That's great. But you want to maximize on the easy questions. So skip one hard question per passage. and bear with me on my writing. My handwriting is much better than this, but we're figuring out. I'm learning how to use this Apple Pencil better. So hang with me. Another thing to think about with the science, and I get asked this a lot, is there prior knowledge included? Or is it based on your science classes? The short answer is kind of. And there's not a lot of like what you can actually study to like pull that prior knowledge. And it actually doesn't really matter like what you got in science class, whether you're like an AP or like a standard student. That is actually irrelevant. Is they will pull a couple of questions that are built on previous science knowledge, but really on the vocab sense. And the big ones that I see come up a lot, and I think I have some pulled to come up today, is going to be an independent variable, a dependent variable. I see pH come up. A couple of ones that I see as well. It does kind of vary. I see density, but you don't really have to solve for it typically. And then control group sometimes comes up. So from a high level stance, just like looking at these words, your independent variable is going to be the one that you change. I'm not going to give you the formal definition because it's not easy to remember that way, but it's the one you have control over or the person conducting the experiment. The dependent variable is the one that is measured. That is the easiest way to simplify it. And then pH is going to be like your acids or your bases. For pH, something will come up with like basic, which just means that the pH is less than 7. It's kind of the summary of that without going too high into it. Density is going to be like the mass divided by volume. And the control group is the group that does not change. And this is stuff you don't have to memorize to improve your science score, but I will say independent and dependent variable are like kind of your game changer things to actually know and improve your science stuff outside of just like speed and really reading the questions closely. So let's go ahead and actually look at some questions. And we're not going to do all of them, but I want to highlight, I'm very much like a hands-on person. And so if I'm able to like look at the material and answer it, I feel like I just understand it so much better. So I want to share that. So this right here is from the April 2026 ACT. So if you took that test, you might recognize it if you took the science. And this is from passage 2. And on passage 2, just kind of giving a high level, I would skip this part and then I would go directly to question number 6. And one thing to think about is, as I mentioned, that there are some questions that are kind of rough, especially typically one per passage is like way harder than the rest. And actually, you can eyeball it most of the time. And the one that is on this particular circumstance is actually just going to be number 10. And the reason I know that is, one, it's typically more wordy. And this is going to take a lot more work to actually like prove and find the answer. So I would rather have a student skip the hardest question and come back to it if they have time. But because they will spend much more time on the easier questions and get more right just statistically that way. So that one is kind of a little bit more wordy. So let's look at like how we actually best solve these questions. And we're going to go ahead and model a couple of them of like how you go back and forth for the passage and all that jazz. Okay, so for number 6, we're going to map this out real quick. So it's telling us to go to table 1, which is why I highlighted it. And then it's going to average PRD for AM1 at 10 ppm. So we are looking at what it's looking for. And so then you've got that, but then it's at 10. And then restarting the second half of number 6 in 3, 2, 1. So number 6, we went through and we highlighted the like location points. And now we are going to look at figure 1 so that we best answer this question. So it says figure 1, which that means we just go right here. That's pretty straightforward. And then it says PRD for AM1 and then average PRD here. And then it is asking for the like at 10 ppm. So let's look through this. So we've got 10 right here. And we're making sure that we look at the right location on the chart. And you're going to guesstimate it's between like, I don't know, like 17, 18%. And so looking at it with number 6, the only logical answer would be H. Now, that one was a little bit easy. They always have, almost always have some of these easy freebies. And I don't want students to miss out on these like freebies just because they don't understand like what the words are. That, like I said, it's irrelevant. It's just like location markers. Okay, so number 7 is a little bit more challenging. So what is the order of dyes listed in table 1 from the dye that slowed the growth of ZM from the most to the dye that slowed the growth the least? So we're going from biggest to smallest. Now, sometimes there's traps in here. This one actually like doesn't have as much of a trap, but let's go ahead and look at table 1. So we are going back to our markers. And with table 1, we are talking about ZM1. And then we're looking at these numbers and we're going from the most to the least. Sometimes I also find it helpful to skim a little bit here if I feel like I need some context. But it says table 1 shows the average PRD at 24 hours for 3 AM species and 3 ZM species for each of the 4 dyes. The concentration of the given dye that which resulted is the greatest PRD across the 3 tested ZM species. So on this question, all you have to do is pretty much organize the greatest to the least, which is going to be like your 98 or your water blue. And then it's going to be the dichloron. And then on the next one is going to be the 60 and then the 50. So just looking at these options on number 7, the answer is going to be A. Okay, so number 8 is where it starts to get like a little confusing for students, but this really just highlights the focus on like the numbers and the points. And that's a lot of these questions here, especially when they have a lot of charts. I will show you a different example that varies, is a little more on the reading comprehension end. So it says, which of the following pairs of RN concentration is the average PRD for AM2, the same as the average PRD for AM3? So we are looking for where these are going to intersect. And because there is a beautiful chart, it makes it so much easier. So as we look through this here, I'm going to go ahead and erase from the previous question. So what we're looking for is the same as the AM3. And then we've got these dots right here. And then we've also got these kind of dashes is kind of where I would call it. And you're going to look where these are intersecting. And this is where students mess up. You've got an intersection there, and then they will miss right here. So it's looking for 2 points. So what we're seeing is 1,000 and 4,000. So let me know in the comments, are you finding these easy, hard? And a lot of these are like this. It literally is just locating information. I'm going to show you number 9 because it's slightly more vocab. So in number 9 in figure 1, the x-axis scale, is the x-axis scale linear or logarithmic, and the y-axis scale linear or logarithmic? For very, very like simple terms, linear is like line, log is going to be like the big dramatic curves, and typically hitting kind of like a growth or like kind of an endpoint there is the best way to describe it. You don't have to know like too deeply with these, but you're looking for kind of like crazy shifts. So let's go ahead and look at our x-axis here. So our x-axis, honestly, it's kind of going crazy. You see how it goes like 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 5,000, and it doesn't have like anything organized linear because it's not like simple, straight. It's kind of going a little bit crazy. And so that's going to be the logarithmic. Now, if you look at the other axis, the y-axis here, you see how it's like nice and clean numbers? That's going to be linear. So if you look at your options here on number 9, your answer is going to be B. There is a more complicated way of explaining this, and you're welcome to let me know in the comments about that. but I try to give things to like a very like tangible, simplistic terms so that like any kid can kind of just make like quick assumptions and quick answers. So the last passage we are going to talk about today, it's one that like whenever I work with students, and I have worked with them on the science, it's just been a little while since I'm in Florida and not that many Florida students are really focused on it, but this is the one like every student complained about, these type of ones, but they're actually my favorite, where they're like student 1, 2, 3, and 4. I find these statistically students to score the highest on these and kind of the lowest on like the physics based passages, or the chemistry one. So I find these kind of as freebies because you do a quick search, and please do not read the passage. If you really want to read the intro or skim, that's totally fine, but that's very different. So let's go ahead and kind of dive in on like just kind of a couple of these terms because they have a little bit more of the like vocabs. So on number 17, it says which of the students 1, 2, 3 stated that DNA synthesis is not affected by temperature. And the wrong way to do this is like, what's DNA synthesis? Like thinking through that. That's irrelevant to getting the answer right, which right now is our goal. And we want to make sure that we are featuring this. So the first one is student 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to skim. And what I'm looking for is anything talking about temperature. And I'm seeing a whole lot talk about temperature there. It says cell growth doesn't occur at pH values less than 2.2 or greater. Temperatures greater than 34 degrees Celsius because DNA synthesis is inhibited in the cell. So student 1 is talking about temperature. So the fast way to go about this is to go ahead and eliminate anything with student 1. So we eliminate A, we eliminate B. And so the answer is very simply C. You can spot check in and see that throughout, but that's kind of the simple way to kind of go about it there. So our next question is going to be number 18, and this is going to be talking about the dependent, and you kind of have to know what the independent variable is too. So the dependent variable is going to be what's measured, and the independent is going to be like what you or the scientist control. So looking at these options here, if we go ahead and look at F, which is going to be temperature, we have to figure out if that is going to be a dependent variable, like it's what's being measured. And if you look at it really quickly, you could say, yeah, temperature is recorded, but temperature is actually what is being changed in this experiment because of actually how the table is set up. You see how they're just going up by increments, and then they are measuring to the right-hand side. So 2, temperature is actually an independent variable, so we would eliminate that one. And we eliminate F. And then we would also eliminate J because it's got the 2 in there. And then G is going to be the cell growth rate. And since the cell growth rate is kind of on this right side and it's changing based on the temperature, and it's what they're actually focused on in the experiment, if you skim, that is going to be a dependent variable. And so now we're down to actually these 2. And then you've got the initial cell density. And whenever you see initial, that typically that should kind of raise a flag that it probably is not going to be the dependent variable. Not always, but if we're looking at the initial cell density, just kind of like skimming through it in the passage, it's just like the starting value that they are using. So, and this one is that's actually the control. So the only like viable or correct option is going to be Roman numeral 3. So this answer is going to be G. And then one other one I want to cover. So on number 22, this is going to be your pH scale. And I might have made a little glitch in the beginning of the video, but I'm going to break it down to provide more clarity so that I can better explain it. Let me slide it over. Okay, so pH is on a scale from like 1 to 14. Water is typically about 7. It's not like perfect, but that's normally about is going to be the answer. So anything like less than 7 is going to be acidic. And then above 7 is going to be basic. And that's going to be like your milk and stuff like that. And acidic is like lemon juice. I won't put milk. Okay, so on this question here, it's kind of a trick. And so they want us to look at the chart on table 1 and figure out if any of these and if how many are going to be basic. But all the pHs here are below 7. So based on this mini cheat sheet, the answer is going to be F, which was stressed out a lot of students choosing 0, but that's just part of it. Another thing that I see kind of come up too is if we look at 23, student 4 indicated that inhibiting the synthesis of molecules composed of what type of subunits affect the cell growth of pretty much SK. This is also a prior knowledge, and this is where they sneak in more prior knowledge. And I've seen this a lot more with the biology questions. And honestly, and this is where it's like really hard to prepare for. And you've got to think through of like, if you can, from like ninth grade biology, like what's going on, what they're referring to. And it's like the synthesis, which is making of the molecules composed of what type of subunits are affecting the cell growth. So let's look at like what it's actually talking about with that SK. So if you look at student 4, like it's saying there, what's really unique is the cell growth does not occur at pH values less than 2.2 or greater than 4.9. DNA synthesis is inhibited in the cell. Neither pH or temperature affects protein synthesis, and that is where they are pulling on prior knowledge and what is making up, like what is talking about what type of subunits affect the cell growth of that. It doesn't like exactly give it away, and that's kind of the problem. Is like people will be looking for all these words. They'd be looking for fatty acids. They would be looking for monosaccharides, which is sugar. They would be looking for nucleotides, which is like going to be the DNA. But what it's really asking for is like that protein and the amino acids. Okay, so that all being said, this was kind of like a bird's eye view, high level, and just giving you some tips and tricks. I didn't go too deep into the science section, but if you have some questions, go ahead and drop in the comments. I hope this inspires you to at least put this to work and actually try like going through these questions and working at least through a practice test and see if you can kind of better understand like how these questions are being asked and pretty much how you can best be prepared for test day. If you want some one-on-one support, we will go ahead and drop our link in the comments, and we have a pretty good sized team that is happy to help you in person if you're local in our area or online. But regardless, go ahead and click like and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon.